Welcome to another installment of 15 Minutes with Andy. We are here in season number 2 as we try to focus on as much positivity as we can in our storytelling. That was the genesis of this whole idea of starting a podcast. Where can we find a niche in the market? And we wanted to land on positivity with so much negativity going on in our world today for a variety of reasons. And always glad to hear different stories and people tell those stories, their stories and their journeys. And we are joined today by, well, Defiance resident now, but not a lifelong Defiance resident in Tod Liffick, right?
Yep, that's right, Andy. Defiance essentially is my hometown. I grew up till the 3rd grade. I lived in Continental. It's where my parents and grandparents are from. So we moved to Ayersville. Technically, my mom and dad, they live in the city, but it's Ayersville School District. So I went to Ayersville when I was in like 3rd grade. Been there ever since.
So Defiance County most of your life.
Yep. Yeah, I call Defiance my hometown for sure.
So what was that childhood like? Tell us a little bit before we get to how you became and landed on firefighting. Tell us a little bit about that journey for you.
Well, it started out, my dad worked at GM, worked there for 40-some years, and my mom worked her whole career. She did insurance for a while, and then she got into the Hornish Brothers Trucking, was there for 20 years. So those were good role models for me. Was fortunate to be able to grow up with all my grandparents for, up until at least high school when my grandfather passed away. But so I got to spend a lot of time. My family, my mom has 3 sisters and 2 brothers, so that's a big family on that side. And I had a lot of family on my dad's side as well, not quite as big as that, but just a good childhood. Very fortunate, had a lot of fun vacations, those types of things, growing up, spent a lot of time with my family, extended family, and, went to Ayersville, loved Ayersville, still do. Tons of friends there. It's a good community, like Austin Carr, who is a family member. He's actually my cousin.
I found that out after the fact.
Yeah, he's more like a nephew, because me and my sister and one other cousin were a lot older than the rest of my cousins. So those kids coming up, where I felt more like not necessarily an uncle, but I looked at them not as much as cousins, but I was older, kind of. So Austin, all his brothers, I got tons of cousins on that side, and I went to Ayersville. Loved sports growing up. And then as I got older in high school, my athletic prowess wasn't that great. I actually grew 2 inches after I graduated high school. So I kind of veered away from the sports, got into working, went to Fort County, loved that. Big advocate of vocational school. I think there's maybe even a bigger need now than there ever was, So I always pushed that. Thought I maybe needed to go to college, so what my friends were doing, so I went to University of Toledo for a year, and was kind of like Austin. A buddy of mine was in the Air National Guard, so he talked me into going to the Air National Guard in Toledo there. Did the boot camp and Air Force boot camp and everything, and was in there for a couple of years, and college was going real good, or at least my social life was going real good.
Yeah.
The college part was not.
Yeah.
I don't think I was really quite ready for that level of education, and the commitment at that time, which I think a lot of kids get into that. I'm sure tons of people and your experiences over the years. They still, I think, they push college a lot more than other careers maybe, or whatever, that you don't need a degree for. So a lot of kids feel like they have to go to college, and maybe they really don't. I think nowadays it just depends on what you want to do. But I tell anybody, like, get a trade, get something, that just do something you like, Well, anyway, I'm back to this. It finally got to the breaking point for me was, I failed the same class twice, and that was like a wake up call, and I said, I got to do something different. This ain't working, So I said, I want to go in the military full time. So I went out to the guard base, and I told them, I want to go in the Air Force full time. And they're like, we can't help you with that. That's not our deal. I talked to the Air Force recruiter. He's like, we can't help you. You're already part of the Air Force, essentially. So I'm thinking, man, what am I going to do, So I just happened to go to the Marine Corps recruiter, and I said, this is my situation. Is there anything you can do? He's like, yeah, we can get you out. He's like, he calls somebody in Detroit or somewhere, and they said, yeah, we'll get it. He says, here, you're going to have to, I'm going to take you out to the guard base on this day. You're going to sign out from them, and I'm taking you straight to the MEP center, and you're going to go enlist. And I was like, okay. So I went home. I told my mom, and she's like, what? What are you doing?
I was going to say, was that surprising to them?
Yeah, I think so, but they knew that I wasn't doing good in school and just needed to do something different, And my dad had always wanted me to kind of go in the military. He was a Vietnam era guy. He never got drafted, so he didn't go to the military, but he kind of regretted it, not because he knew tons of guys that did, and he felt, I think he felt kind of like he should have done it. He regretted it later on. So I always kind of liked the military anyway. I always tell people I played with G.I. Joes probably a lot longer than I should have. I've always had a fascination with the military. So
in your early 20s now when this is happening?
Yeah, I was 21 when I went to boot camp for Marine Corps, because Marine Corps is the only military branch that you have to do their boot camp. They don't recognize anybody else's boot camp. It's longer. Obviously, it's a little more intense than most. So I had to go to boot camp again. But I was a lot more mature that time, and knew kind of a little bit what to expect. So for me, it was kind of almost fun to watch the other younger kids, just out of school like I was before, and getting pummeled and breaking down and building back up, all that process, So. I thoroughly enjoyed the Marine Corps, and anybody that will tell you, like I know, I would like to meet John that you had on the first season.
Oh, John Ely.
Amazing. I love to listen to these guys that did career military, because it's very interesting to me, just knowing where they had been and some of those types of things. But there's a certain level in the military of stuff you have to deal with, like on a daily basis, and I got to do a lot in my military career. I traveled. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get away, go do something. So I signed up. I went to Okinawa for a year and got to be on a ship. Went to numerous countries, Russia, Hong Kong, Korea, Philippines. So I got to see a lot of the world, which is what I wanted to do. And I don't regret any of that. My military occupation was not something that I chose, but wanting to go in so quickly, I was kind of settled for whatever they would give me. And so it came to the point where I was like, I either going to have to re-enlist and try to get a different job or just get out. So at that point in my life, I decided I was just going to get out. And I would always come home and hang out with my buddies on leave, and I would go to country concert. So I actually came home one summer, and my buddies said, hey, we want you to bring a van down full of girls that are friends of ours, So me being, I did what I had to do,
Yeah.
I'll take one for the team,
Sure.
So I end up meeting my future wife. She goes with us on the trip, down there, and we have a good time, and stayed in touch with her a little bit. But she was she had just graduated from Ohio State, was moving back home to get a job. And
home's Defiance County for her?
Yeah, she was a Defiance girl. So I was kind of like, well, she basically was saying, like, I'm not going to do a long distance relationship, I like you and everything, but it's probably not. I didn't think it was going to work either. That's a long distance to be away. I was in North Carolina at the time. So I decided that I was going to move back home. I had originally had some plans to be with maybe moving my sister to Georgia. She was living down there at the time. But ended up deciding ultimately to come back to Defiance. And the rest, as far as that goes, I came back here, got back in touch with a buddy who was working in the machining industry, is what I'd done before with my 4-county skills, and got into a kind of an apprenticeship and was doing some engineering stuff with them. And then a guy that I was working with at Kester Machine, he said, hey, the fire department's hiring, you're a veteran, you should, they give military credit. And I was thinking, well, I never really thought about being a firefighter, by then, I'd been out of the military for several years, and the biggest thing that I missed about the military was the camaraderie, the guys I served with, just being a guy, just being a dude, like hanging out, having fun,
Plus that, and when you mentioned Austin Carr, who had been on with me before, but any military person you talk to, always the word that comes up is brotherhood.
Yeah, for sure. Certainly, yeah. It's huge, I don't really, hang out with a lot of the guys that I served with, but I know that I could always call several of them and or they could do the same for me, and back then that's when the internet was just getting going good, and this one of my buddies lives in Dayton. He said, hey, you ought to get on this Facebook thing. He's like, hey, all these dudes that we were in with, they're all on there, and you can catch up with them and see what they're doing now and stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome, and so I did it, and I kind of got in touch, caught up with a bunch of guys, which was amazing, to me, that's the real benefit of social media and that kind of stuff, It's kind of branched out into some other areas that maybe aren't so great now, but originally the idea was awesome, so that was huge to be able to reconnect, because I can't imagine guys in, Vietnam era or World War II, how the heck you ever found out what those guys are ever doing again, I guess you could try to write them letters and those types of things, or, even a phone call probably was kind of, pushing it, I guess.
Yeah, because as well as I do, life intervenes anyway, so it makes it tougher.
That's the biggest thing, you kind of move away from that because you're doing something different. You're with your families, you're doing, you're on the other side of the country and things like that. So one thing a little bit I regret is not staying in touch with some of those guys more. But like you said, that's just how life goes. So
firefighter, obviously, and paramedic or first responder, that really wasn't part of the grand plan. You almost fell into it a little bit.
I really did fall into it. It was just a chance meeting, and I take that back. Matt Ripke over there, he grew up in my neighborhood. He was a couple years younger than me, so his dad worked at the fire department for 30 years. And I knew him growing up. They lived right across the road from him. And his mom, dad, the whole family's a great family. And so I had actually, I reached out to him, Denny Ripke, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about, applying. Would you recommend it? And he's like, heck yeah, it's a great job. I would definitely recommend it. I don't ever regret doing this. And so I applied and did well in the test. And actually, at that time, I was going to Northwest State. I was almost done with my associate's degree. And so I was really, up on it. And ironically, after I got out of the military for 4 years, actually 6, if you count the reserve or the Guard, but I was a lot more mature, and I took the college a lot more serious.
I was just thinking that as you're talking college.
And I did a heck of a lot better the second time around. So
it's crazy how those things happen.
Yeah. So that's how I kind of explained it when I talk to kids, if you're not ready for college, don't do it, figure it out a little bit, or do something to figure out what you want to do if you're not ready, don't commit to it if you're not going to give 100%, because nowadays college is a lot more expensive, it's a big burden, more so than it was,
absolutely
30 years ago, So
firefighting, tell us a little bit. Not everybody gets to be that. I mean, that's like one of the jobs when you're a kid that you always say you're going to be: police officer, firefighter, whatever. So take us in that world a little bit. Training and fighting fires on a regular basis. What is all that like, Todd?
Well, I like I said, I had no experience, which Defiance, and there's several other cities that you can get hired in at without any experience, because they do a civil service test to make it kind of fair for everybody, I guess. Now, if you have experience in that and you get interviewed, there's a potential that, we're going to hire somebody that's got more experience. If it's just you and another guy and he's got that and you don't, that might be what it comes down to, because training's expensive. So in Defiance, we do fire and EMS full time. So you had to be a firefighter level 2, which is this industry standard kind of for full-time firefighters. So in Reynoldsburg, Ohio is the Ohio Fire Academy, and they train you down there. So they sent me to Ohio Fire Academy as soon as I got hired in. I was on the job for a week, got to do a ride along for a week, and then I went to Reynoldsburg, and then they immerse you into it. It used to be about 6 to 8 weeks, and now it's about 10. They just keep adding stuff to it, and they do a great job down there. They have full-time firefighters from around Columbus area that are instructors, and then some, normal staff. I don't know if you remember Jerry Robinson. He used to be here in Defiance. He was the full-time chief. He actually was like the commandant or whatever back then, And so I had got down there, met up with some guys in my class. I was kind of like learning everything new. There's a lot of skills you got to learn. You got to do a lot of hands-on practical exams, those types of things, to pass it, to complete it. And made it through that. I was in pretty good shape then. I really got into fitness more when being in the Marine Corps, you're kind of forced to, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
But I really kind of, I drew me in, because like I said, I hadn't been a real good athlete in high school, and I got a lot stronger and physically and mentally, and that carried over. Even after I got on the fire department, I got into doing marathons and triathlons and stuff like that. But anyway, got through that. Well, then you have to be an emergency medical technician or EMT, at least the basic level. So they do like a accelerated course at the fire academy. So I came home for like a weekend, I think, and I went right back down there to do EMT class, which was a 4-week condensed class, which around here, if you try to do it, you're going to take several months to do it, a couple days a week or whatever. So that was intense, not having much medical background or anything like that, So I was, really studying, and I want to make sure I passed because my job depended on it. So I passed that, and then came back to Defiance and started working on shift. And we work 24 hours on and have 48 hours off. So you go in every morning at 7, work till 7 the next morning, and with the same group of guys, basically. So that really appealed to me, to get back into that kind of that military mode, which was great. And so I started doing that. Well, then that was 2001. Been on the job for 5 months. 9/11 happens. I come home from my sister and I had bought a duplex, and I was living in half and she was living in half. And I got off shift that morning because I remember this literally like it was yesterday. And just turned on the TV. I was winding down a little bit, probably going to take a nap or whatever, or go do something that day. And I see the news start coming on, and I called down to the station. And I'm like, hey, man, you guys got to turn the TV on. There's something bad happening in New York. It's crazy. And then all that, it just progressed from there. So that was, being in that job, new to that job at that time, that was pretty intense to, but in reality, what it did was it brought a little light to, firefighters in general and first responders,
and something that a light should have been shining probably all along.
True.
And it may have a little bit, but now it becomes more a spotlight on because of that, a horrific event.
For sure. So that, that impacted me. And a lot of the guys that I worked with, there was guys that wanted to volunteer and go to New York and all this kind of stuff. There may have been 1 or 2 guys around this area that might have went to help. But other than that,
Because it goes back to that brotherhood thing.
Sure.
Military to fight, it's the same concept.
Yeah, those guys are there, digging through that piles trying to find, their buddies and stuff. So that's intense, So, progressed on through the career. The next step was to become a paramedic, which we were kind of switching to ALS service, Advanced Life Support, in Defiance at that time. So the city was paying guys to go to paramedic school because it takes about a year. And I definitely wanted to do it. I'm like, well, one, it was a pay raise, so I'm going to do that. But, it's just intriguing to me. It's a higher level, skill set. And so they were sending a couple guys ahead of me, and I went and talked to the fire chief, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a family here pretty soon, and I don't want to wait like 3 or 4 years and have.
Because you're married now?
Yep, got married. I forgot to say that, but
that's okay. That's my job. I'll walk you back.
I'm trying to transit. This time I prolonged my engagement. My wife says we dated for a long, like 4 or 5 years, probably in reality. But I wasn't ready to have a family yet, and I didn't want to commit. Like, I wanted to do some stuff together when we were younger, and we took trips and had a lot. We had an awesome honeymoon, because I waited a year. I got married the following year in 2002 to want to get that first year under my belt. And my wife had just started a good job a couple years before that. She works for Social Security Administration. So she kind of fell into that good job, and I fell into the fire department. We were young, and we knew eventually we wanted to start a family and get a house and that kind of stuff. So, but I wanted to get this paramedic school out of the way because I didn't want to try to be going to paramedic school and having a baby. So I went and talked to Chief, and he's like, well, I said, I'm willing to pay for my own tuition because I still had some GI Bill money left. I wanted to go to University of Toledo because they had a pretty good program at that time, and they would accept the GI Bill. So he's like, all right, I'll help you out as much as I can, but you're still going to have to work your full shifts, because the other guys get time off when they're in the program. Well, it just happened. I was in the program for a couple months, and one of the other guys, he kind of washed out of the program. So they let me take his spot as far as getting days off. So it worked out better. So I was able to commit more time and, not have to be.
Timing's everything.
Oh,
isn't it?
Yeah, it worked out perfect. So, and then just so happened that we ended up, my wife got pregnant with my son. So she was due after the program was over, about probably 6 months or whatever. So it all worked out good. We got a house, and then just progressed on from there. Had another daughter I had my son and then a daughter a couple years later, and then just got into being a dad. So
I'll let you name drop wife and kids.
Yeah,
for
my
those
name
that don't.
Amy. She's a Defiance grad, Ohio State grad. So I know that doesn't really thrill you too well.
It's okay.
Definitely doesn't thrill Jurger.
Yeah.
I'll get into him in a minute. But yeah, she's a Defiance girl, has a big family, huge family, awesome parents. Her dad passed away a few years ago. Really, really good guy.
Yeah, and somebody I know you were, from talking to folks, you were really close to. Yeah. And your son and daughter, and one's getting ready to graduate.
Yeah, I got a senior. It's been awesome. He played football a couple years, but baseball's always been his biggest thing, And so I kind of lived through the whole me not playing high school sports through him. Not wanting to be that dad, but just saying that I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And my daughter's very athletic too. Did gymnastics for several years. And which it built up a good base for her, but that's a very demanding, grinding sport. If you don't know, if people who don't know, they'll learn quick if their daughters or even a son's in it. But then she wanted to try school sports, so she moved into volleyball and then kind of branched into the cheerleading from gymnastics. So she's ending her sophomore year. I'm going to be driving pretty soon, which is crazy. So
yeah. So, I got to ask this question because you're the first. Well, no, you're not. Dave Robston was on, but we dove into him more from how he dealt with a situation where he lost a brother and PTSD. But as a firefighter, you've already mentioned the word intense a lot.
Yeah.
So certainly a ton more than you want to probably even keep track of. Intense situations, bad situations, but something that's not maybe mentioned enough is the toll that potentially that takes on the wife and your kids at home.
Oh, yeah.
So you're in the teeth of fighting blazes, and I mean, you know what you're getting into, and that's part of the job. So you know what it's about. Is it tougher on families?
Yeah, it really is. It gets overlooked, I think, and that kind of in that same regard as military families, because that was reality. That was one of the biggest deciding factors in me getting out of the military, because I really thought about making it a career, was trying to raise a family. And I know John talked about that. It's tough. I mean, you're deployed a lot. You're gone. You're relying on your wife to do everything. Which, in my regard, my wife did a ton. When I was at work, getting those kids to here and there and working. But she had a family base that helped us out a lot too. My parents, her parents, extended family, good friends that you could rely on. And military, you're kind of, when you're in California or somewhere, you don't have that, so that was a deciding factor. But yeah, definitely my wife's been awesome, super supportive. So very fortunate.
21 years, right?
Yep.
As a firefighter?
Yeah.
What made you think this is time?
Well,
to step away?
Honestly, it kind of sounds a little silly, but it was a culmination of things. I love the job, and I'd seen some other guys get burned out when it was getting closer to those years that they had been there, and sometimes stay too long, maybe, and they resented the job a little bit, resented, dealing with a lot of the hassles you got to deal with. We're up a lot. I mean, and that was one deciding factor is, we primarily do EMS calls. That's our, it's probably like 80%, 20%, so those calls come at all times of the night, so you rarely get a good night's sleep up there at the station, and the older, when you're younger, you don't care. You just keep moving on.
Because you only need 2 or 3 hours when you're younger anyways.
Yeah, and with the family and stuff, that was tough. I watched my kids. I can't say I babysit them. You can't babysit your own kids, I guess.
No.
So that's what somebody told me early on. So I use that one quite frequently. But I watch my kids on my days off, So I come home and, you could get a nap or whatever. But then my dad, and he retired, so he did it when I was at work. And then, we had other people help us out too, for sure. But as you get older, and almost every year since I started, we've had increasing run volume of calls. And, the population hasn't gotten that much bigger, so I'm not sure exactly why, but every year the runs have gone up. And this past year, we had over 3,000 calls, which is a record. And we're on pace this year to do it again, over. So it gets harder as you get older and not getting that sleep and my son's senior year was coming up this year, and I didn't want to miss a lot of his games, and you got to miss stuff. You miss Christmas some years, you miss whatever, birthdays and things. You try to take days off for that, but you can't get them all,
No.
So I was like, you know what? I think I could almost retire. So I looked into it. Well, the way our retirement works is you can buy military time. Because you're supposed to have 25 years to retire. So I looked into it, and I had already bought in some of my years, and I had one more year. And I thought, if I buy this year, that'll get me to 25, and I could retire. And so I talked to my wife about it, and I was able to, get on her health insurance, which that's a huge thing for anybody these days,
Mm-hmm.
And so it worked out, and I said, I think I'm going to do it. We're going to Alaska this summer for my son's going to play on the River Bandits baseball team, the Legion team, and I didn't want to miss that. And basically, I would have had to use every day of vacation and time off holiday I had to try to make it to his games, and I still would have missed some. And my daughter's coming up volleyball. She's plays a lot of volleyball, cheerleading, that type of thing. I'm like, I could go to all these things, I wouldn't have to miss them. And so I started doing some numbers, crunching some numbers, and I tell you, I think I can make it, with talking to my wife, and she's like, yeah, let's do it. Just do it. I'm like, okay, awesome.
So it became effective when, or becomes effective when?
April.
It became effective in April,
yes,
so you're barely into it.
Yeah,
you're
really.
gonna do, but you're not going away.
No,
correct?
I was fortunate in Defiance. The way it works is we have some part-time guys, and nobody had ever done it before. Had been a full-timer and went to being a part-time guy. We'd talked to a couple guys about doing it, but by that time they were just ready to be out of there. And the schedule's real flexible, so I could kind of work some of my hours that when it was convenient for me, I guess. And one thing is I wanted to keep my certifications because as I progressed through my career, I got promoted to lieutenant, became, did a lot of dealing with the trainings, and just a general leadership role. And I really wasn't ready to give up all that yet because I'd put a lot of time into it, so I'm still a paramedic. We have to do a lot of continuing education hours in the fire service to keep your certifications. So I can still do that through working at the fire department now. But I just go in. The biggest thing, I get to sleep every night, unless I leave my pager on to where I can respond from home, If it works out, I definitely will, because, we're always short on manpower. Defiance is so busy now that used to get a lot of guys would come in on their days off and cover and stuff. But it just gets harder when we have a lot of younger guys and family commitments and things. And I don't want to say the generation's different, because the guys are still hard workers and that, but a lot of these younger guys, they're more committed to their family and their off time, which is good, because you can get burned out in that job.
In a hurry, can't you?
Big time, yeah. So those guys taking time off and not devoting their whole life to it, because there was some guys, older guys I worked with, they were down there every day on their days off, because it was a good way to make some overtime. In the city, it was cheaper than hiring other guys, So they would come in and stay for an hour while the ambulance was out, and they would come back. Or if we had a fire, they would come in and respond with the other vehicles and stuff, which kind of I can still do that. But yeah, I like the training aspect of it. I like to work with the younger guys. We have a fire training center essentially now. We got some funding for, and our chief was progressive on getting that put in to where we can do live fire training now in the city, which is awesome. It's good. We try to do it at least a couple times a year, and we also get a lot of the volunteer departments involved because they don't get as much training, and those guys and gals, they all have full-time jobs, most of them someplace else. So I give them a lot of credit for doing that because it's very demanding to go and do something for free, essentially, to help your community or whatever, So
the need is, like any position right now in our world, well, not any, but a lot of places in our world, a lot of careers in our world, the need is there. So, if anybody's listening to this podcast and wants to volunteer or become a firefighter or whatever it might be, the need is there, whether you're in Defiance or Montpelier or wherever.
Everywhere. Even all around Williams County is almost all volunteers, except for a few guys down here at the station in Bryan, so they're relying on it, the whole county essentially. Now they got full-time EMS, which we don't have in Defiance. We have some, spotty coverages of full-time people like Hicksville for certain hours and those types of things, but overall they're still all relying on volunteers, So they do call us, I'm saying as Defiance, to come and help them, occasionally when they don't have anybody to take a call, And we rely on them as well. If we have a big fire or something, we'll call them to bring engines in and help us, So we like to train with those guys to try to make sure everybody's on the same page, that type of thing. And, we don't want anybody to get hurt. That's the biggest thing, It's a dangerous job. It's a demanding job. Physically wise, it can be, so.
Would you change anything about what you've done?
I don't think so.
Maybe other than studied harder the first time around at Toledo.
Yeah. Well,
But it still shaped you, though, right?
I ended up going back. It's funny because I went back and got my associate's degree at Toledo when I did my paramedic school. So I did that. Right now I have 3 associate's degrees. So I always laugh that I got enough credits for a master's degree, but I don't have the paperwork to show, and I'm actually finishing. That was another thing. I'm almost done with my bachelor's degree right now. So I've been working on that for a couple of years. That's kind of been a goal. I always wanted to get it, Even if I don't ever do anything with it, it was something that I set for myself to do, So there's some opportunities there. Maybe next year if something works out, that I could go back to work somewhere full time, but right now I'm just enjoying the baseball season, the spring, and I actually drive the bus. I've been a bus driver for several years, part-time bus driver, so I basically got into it to take my kids' trips. I said, Mom, might as well. I'm getting paid for it. They needed they need the drivers, and so I've been doing that. My daughter doesn't love it as much. I do the volleyballs and the cheerleadings, and I harass her friends and stuff when they come on. And
daughters and sons are different. You know that.
And I coached. I loved baseball. I helped coach for several years, and really started to miss it as my son got older. I got, they cut you out of it after so long. The varsity coaches, they don't like parents helping them out too much, So my way to stay into it was to drive the bus. And I'm friends, Rick Weaver is the assistant coach, and I'm, I know Tom well. Tom held at Defiance, and Rick, actually a Bryan guy, but he lives right across the street from me. So I've known him ever since we moved into our house like 12 years ago. His daughter is a senior as well. And so, I get back into it. I'm the bus driver, but I like to be in the mix with the kids. I know all these boys. They grew up with my son, so it's awesome. Good opportunity to do that.
5 years, 10 years. I mean, can you see yourself still doing, in some capacity, involved in firefighting?
I work for a contractor, which I may get. Once this season's over with, I'll probably do more in depth of that. But we work at industrial firefighting things like at the Lima refinery. We do like safety standby, and they kind of have their own fire department there, but they don't have the manpower to do it. So we kind of do maintenance on their hydrants, their fire hose, their fire trucks, help train the employees. So that's a great job. Kind of keeps me involved in it. And I get to work with a bunch of guys from around the Lima area, a bunch of guys that are all firefighters at other places. So that's a great opportunity. I really enjoy it. It's something new. That's a big thing I'm doing right now. But one thing that I hadn't touched on it was my dad had a stroke about 7 years. It'd be 7 years. And he never really fully recovered from it. And he did well for a few years. I mean, they told us he wasn't going to make it. And somehow he did. So my mom retired basically to help take care of him. And he had been doing real well for several years. Well, up until like before COVID here, he had some setbacks. And he's developed like Parkinson's. And this guy has been through the ringer, man. He's got he's a medical miracle.
Yeah.
So as he's gotten longer in it, he's gotten less and less mobile, and he can't really do a lot of things for himself. And my mom's taken on that role of caregiver, which she did for several years because my sister, I mean, this is crazy, but my sister has had cancer 3 times. So she's a cancer survivor from back in the day. She eventually ended up in Georgia and went to Georgia State. Well, she had this crazy diagnosis of cancer that only kids are supposed to get. It's a rare cancer. So she ended up moving back home to get treatment. That way she could be have my mom and dad help her and me eventually, which they did way more than I did. But so she got through that. And that's when I moved back home, when I got in the military. And eventually, I kind of said, I'm probably just going to stay in Defiance. So she did, too. So she's been here ever since. Well, she branched out into special education, and that's the one Austin was also talking about. That's my sister, who works at Good Samaritan School. So she does that. Well, then a few years ago, she had her second bout of cancer, different kind of cancer this time. But her same doctor, she has been going to UTMC, which is University of Toledo now, but the same doctor's been there the whole time. This guy's like a legend, and he's had to build a real tight relationship with my sister and my mom. And so she got through that, battled through that one. Well, then here a few months ago, she had this thing going on with her eye, so she goes to get it looked at, and they're like, you have this rare cancer in your eye.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, she cannot get a break, So she's just a really strong person.
You're surrounded by fighters, and you're fighting right along with them,
yeah.
I know.
So, I'm the healthy one. My mom's getting up there in age, and so she's doing everything she can to keep Dad out of nursing home, which I totally agree because in my work, one of our main customers was nursing homes, taking them from the nursing home to emergency room. So we see it in there. It's tough. They're understaffed, and it's just someplace that there's a need for it. But if you can stay out of there, I think anybody would want to stay out of there. So my mom's been determined to keep Dad out of the nursing home. So my sister was dealing with all this. I said, this is a perfect opportunity. Me retiring, I can help her out. Cause
again, a timing thing.
Yeah. That was another thing, a factor in it. So said I'll pick up the slack a little bit, and help Mom out. So I go over there quite a bit. She only lives a mile away from me, so it's perfect. And try to help her out as much as I can. Dad's he's strong. He hasn't given up, and he's always positive, which is awesome because
it's tough to stay that way. Isn't
a lot
it?
of people, they get when all these medical things happen to them, they get pretty negative, or they become I don't want to say, like, my grandpa was my mom actually, she's an amazing person. My grandpa wasn't doing well in his health, and she decided to take him in and brought him in to stay at her house, along with dealing with my dad. So, and, everybody thought she was crazy, but that's just how she is.
And it doesn't surprise you one bit.
No. So she kept doing that for a while, and eventually my grandpa, he got, kind of like dementia and those types of things, and he would get kind of nasty, with her, and not because that wasn't who he was.
No.
It's just a part of that disease process or whatever, getting old, But my dad's never been like that. Never been, doesn't get angry, doesn't, So that's been huge because it makes it a lot easier to want to help somebody, not only because they're your loved one, but they're also genuinely still trying. And
that's another thing. A lot of them, whether they have dementia or not, sometimes when they feel like it's getting closer to the end than not, then some people do give up. And I guess that's one of your positives probably in the takeaways. Not only positivity with Dad, but he's still fighting, still wanting to be.
Yeah. We drag him out to every baseball game that we can get to, that she can get him up there, and it's, I don't want her to miss it, because she's given up a lot.
Yeah.
So
your son and daughter had a pretty good cheering section then.
Yeah,
all
huge.
around. Yeah, all around.
Yeah, I didn't mention my Williams County connection. Years ago, like I said, I moved in over there by Rick, and he said that Jay Jerger and Mandy Jerger, they had just moved to Defiance. They didn't have a lot of friends yet. He took on the assistant principal's job, and I didn't really know him at all, but he had a son and a daughter that were the exact same age as my son and daughter. So we go to a kid's soccer, 8, whatever it is. How old were they then? Probably 6 or 7 years old, So 13 years ago. And we meet them there, and hey, how you doing? Rick said you guys had kids and stuff, that were the same, and because he knew Rick from the big rival of the Montpelier-Bryan rivalry back in the day. So, well, it just clicked. Like, great people. We have a lot of same interests, and we were having a little party at our house, and maybe getting a little bit too crazy. And I invited him over. I said, hey, we're having this thing. If you can come over, show up later. Well, we had gotten into it a little bit earlier in the day, and we're doing some stuff. It's called a hash run, where you run around and you have some drink stops and you do some traditions and stuff. They pull up, and we're doing some crazy shenanigans out in the driveway and stuff, and they're like, man, we like these people. They're like us. They're crazy mom. Like, you grew up, Jay, and so what those.
You caught yourself, but you're on the right track. Crazy Montpelier people.
Yeah. And just general, like good, young guy, like have fun. Like, so that's the way I grew up. That's the way they grew up. My wife's like that. All her brothers are a lot of fun. So it just all clicked. Well, then it ended up we started doing all these sports together, and our kids became best friends, still are, right now. So it's been a good ride with them, and it's been a great connection as far as Williams County, to meet all these people from Williams County, that his family and friends, his mom Denise and her stepdad Phil, or his stepdad Phil, great people. Man, they become, and Mandy's mom, who lives in Columbus, but they've become like our family. Chris and Tom Kurt, Chris and Tom, the Kirks, and I could go on with all these people, all the people that the Briggles,
Isn't it amazing how worlds? Yeah. Just by Rick Weaver saying something to you, and now that's branched off in 1,000 different directions.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So, like they always had the big Fort Myers spring break trips. All these people, I don't know if you ever been down there with them.
Nope, not in that group. Nope.
But
I've heard of them.
Tons of group from Montpelier, people that go down there, have been going there since Jay was a kid. So they would go down, and they invited us to go down a few years ago, and we went down with them and got a place there at the same complex and everything. And they just welcomed us in like we were, we'd known them our whole lives, So it was awesome. It's been like that ever since, really.
I think, and you know what? I think that in general, you could say that about just Northwest Ohio.
Yeah.
I mean, we're lucky and fortunate to be in this place. Do we have our differences? Is there some divisiveness? Absolutely there is. But when push comes to shove, when friends or family are needed, we rally together.
Yeah.
We just do.
As I said, we were talking earlier before this about the Diamond Kings was this travel baseball team that Jay and I had got in with Jason Brown here. He was starting it. Got our kids into it with him. Well, they get to play with all these kids from around the area, that they would have probably never met had we not got into that opportunity. But now they're all buddies, and the way social media is now, they can all stay in touch and everything. And we got to meet their families. So, we got friends from Archbold, Tenora, Antwerp, and that was a great opportunity. But I got to know even more people from Bryan, the Hesses were. They're great. Dominic's, like you've had Dylan on here. He was on our team, They're just great people. His parents are amazing, They are like family to us, Jason, Heidi, same way, So, yeah, Amy and Benji are amazing. They don't get enough credit for, being good people. And I know Dylan expounded on it, but it's been kind of crazy because I was listening to him on there, and I'm thinking, when he was younger, he started playing Diamond Kings with us. And me having a background, the paramedic background, I knew quite a bit about diabetes, and I dealt with tons of diabetic emergencies and those types of things. So when I found out he was diabetic when we first met him, I kind of took I'll keep an eye on this kid type thing, because he was still figuring out a lot of things with his pump and those types of things, and and the technology has gotten way better for him. He can manage it now. But I would talk to Amy or Benji about it, and she'd be like, "Yeah, just keep an eye on him. He gets," and I could recognize it. There was several games when he'd tell you he got little. He gets goofy, like you can see it, and he gets grumpy, and something's up.
Because it's not him.
It's not him, because he's a great kid, and so we kind of bonded a little bit on that end of it, and we've always been in touch since then. Even as the boys got older, they're more kind of rivals. But we didn't get to play Bryan this year. That just hasn't worked out. But,
and that friendship and that family again, or brotherhood, that comes back to it. That'll continue beyond them playing.
Yeah, these guys will be friends. I guarantee you, they're gonna meet up at wherever they go to college or whatever they do. They'll get together, and do things. My son, his girlfriend is from Bryan here, so he's over here quite a bit. But before he had actually kind of met her, or they got to be in a relationship, I guess, he was over here hanging out with Quinn Brown and some of these guys, Dylan and those guys, just because he knew them and they could drive now and they could go do stuff and see stuff, which was fun. I thought it was awesome, because just getting out and being friends with new people and having a lot in common and seeing things, it's like you said, Northwest Ohio is awesome like that. I feel like literally I could go to any town, which we do a lot. I love to talk to people at sporting events and stuff, and I'd be like, "Oh, you're from there? Yeah, I know so-and-so. Oh, yeah, I know them."
And it all connects.
It all connects, and it's awesome, And like you said, there is differences, but things are not great right now in the world, with politics and that kind of stuff. But I feel like people in general around here, they do have their differences, but they treat people good, mostly good, I guess. I think we could all do better than that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
In reality.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I think we get caught up in all these things that in the end they really don't mean that much, They get consumed by what they see on TV or hear, and they kind of forget about the real meaning of being just good to each other, and so, I don't try to get too wrapped up in that stuff because I just see people get drugged down by it, and it changes who they are and makes them people that I don't really think they necessarily want to be, I guess, or so. Yeah.
That's a good place to kind of drop. Now, you've heard enough podcasts. I have a speed round.
Yeah.
Did you prepare for this?
I was preparing.
Oh my God, you did.
I wanted to make sure I got some good ones on here.
So you didn't want dead air? Is that what it was?
I like game shows and stuff like that. So
okay.
I enjoy it.
So you're ready?
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite word?
Well, I was thinking there's several words, but after I listened to Austin's podcast, I was thinking like freedom. Freedom's, taken for granted a lot, but also respected, and I think if people realize, like Austin, it took a life-changing experience for him to truly appreciate what he has here, and not necessarily everybody has to do that, but maybe reflect sometimes about what people have given up,
Yep.
So
freedom.
We got the memorial there at the courthouse in Defiance. It's got all the names on there of those that gave their life for the country. So sometimes I just drive by and think about that, So
Least favorite word?
Right now, I would say hate. It's used too much, really. It's going around too much. Anybody can say they hate something, like I hate black licorice or something. But when you're talking about other people, just because of the way they look or the way they act or what they think, I think we've got too much of that going on right now. Mm-hmm. So I'd really like to see people get back to just respecting people, maybe not agreeing with them, but at least respecting them and treating them decently, Just because they're not the same way you are doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong. It just means that you can disagree. Or one thing I would like to see people focus more on is what we have in common as to what we don't have in common,
That's well said.
So,
sound or noise that you love?
Well, I love to hear a jet fly over, like at the games, the big sporting events when they do the military flyovers. I was on in the air wing of the Marine Corps and also in the Air Guard. So hearing those jets fly over, I dealt with aircraft quite a bit, got to fly in a lot of them. So I love the sound of jets flying over, but I also like a train whistle too.
Okay.
My grandpa worked on the railroad, so we get a fair amount of train traffic as you guys do, mm-hmm. and I always think about that when I hear a train whistle. So.
All right. So the opposite, sound or noise that you hate.
I would definitely say there's a very specific tone. All firefighters or EMTs will say this. That tone goes off at the fire station. That means that there's a call is coming in. So when that tone, you get very annoyed by it. If you've been up 2 or 3 times in the middle of the night, just got back to sleep for maybe a half hour, 15 minutes, and that tone goes off again. I definitely don't miss that. The biggest thing is getting to sleep at night now is been huge. So that's why I pretty much told everybody, I haven't really retired too much, but I get to sleep at night.
So, that makes a world of difference.
Not hearing that tone go off is pretty nice.
So what profession other than your own would you have liked to attempt, or maybe still like to attempt?
Well, that's why I keep telling everybody, I keep going to school or learning something different. Like, I'm getting into umpiring now. That's my way. I think I'm going to stay in baseball, once my son's moved on. I like coaching too, but I think umpiring would be fun to see other teams and that kind of stuff, more flexible, I guess. But I always, if I wouldn't have, I kind of thought I would stay in the military. A lot of times I regret not doing my full time, at least 20 years. Just because there was a lot more opportunities out there of things that I wanted to do or places I wanted to go that I didn't go. But I don't regret it because of my family, being at home, helping everybody at home and just having my kids grow up there with their grandparents and family. So I don't regret that. But one crazy thing I always thought about was like being not necessarily like a cowboy, but like a cattle ranch, maybe like out west somewhere. That was kind of always like something I thought would be cool to do,
Yeah.
So probably not going to happen, but never say never.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You never know.
That's why I tell all these kids, like, it's very hard for kids coming out of high school to, know what they want to do when they're 18 years old. And I tell a lot of people, like, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Mm-hmm. So, I'm still going to school. It's part of that process. I just like to learn different careers or different paths. I'm interested in a lot of stuff, so.
Okay. Last one. And this is always that one because you don't want to think about it big picture when we're sitting here and are at 50.
Yeah.
But how would you like to be remembered?
Well, mostly somebody that kind of stepped up. I feel like I want to do my part. Like the military service, serving on my community, the fire department, those are all, I feel like I would want somebody to say that guy, and somebody that you could count on, I guess, that was counted on and did what needed to be done when it had to be done, I would say that's the most, a good compliment, I guess. I
can't think of a better one, really.
Right, yeah. So,
okay.
That's just that's just the way I've been since I was a kid, really. So, my dad taught me a good work ethic, mom and dad work ethic, and it's just carried over. Like now I mow a few yards for some senior citizens. I mean, obviously they pay me, but they don't have anybody else to fall on to, Mm-hmm. So I like doing that. I like talking to people. I like hearing stories. I love the podcast. So I really appreciate you doing this. Everything you do, honestly. I think you got a really awesome thing going over here. So
I hope so.
I think you.
It's because of guys like you or people like you that are coming on. That's what I tell people all the time. I said, I'm just the conduit to your story. I just want your story out. Or you mentioned Austin or John or whoever I have on here. Yeah. Sherry Hammersmith was a great story. Sherry,
obviously I know her story, but to hear her. I haven't had any in-depth talks with her or anything like that. I just know her as an acquaintance, but I know the story. And to hear her talk about it, that's pretty powerful. So,
Tod, thanks for being with us. Yeah. Appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing. Make sure you keep all those guys in Defiance in line that you mentioned, and then there are plenty more over there that you got to keep in line.
You still got the Foz here, so I didn't mention him, but I love listening to your Wednesday night shows. Those are awesome when we get a chance, That aspect of what you do for local sports and stuff is amazing to me. I love it. I love listening to the coaches, you guys' perspective. I mean, reality. I mean, even the music here, like, I'm an old headbanger, man. I'm a hair guy, That was my
That's our generation.
Growing up. So pretty much everything you play here is awesome. So, I'm a huge fan. So
I appreciate that, Tod.
A little plug there,
All right. But, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So.
People that are listening to this, that I will always appreciate the plug.
I always try to tell my kids how awesome my mullet was back in the day, and they don't think it's that great.
No, but mullets are back. They're back.
They're back.
They're just not quite as good.
To me, they never really went away. They shouldn't have, I guess. But,
hey, thanks, Tod. I appreciate it. Thanks for everything you have done and continue to do in Defiance and beyond. Tod Liffick, our guest this time, and that's going to do it for this segment of 15 Minutes with Andy. Thanks for tuning in to this particular podcast. You can find any and all of our guests on our 15 Minutes with Andy YouTube page and become a subscriber. You'll get notifications on when the new one is up. Until then and until next time, thanks for listening. Have a great rest of your day.